You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 255. Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. Today, my guest is Anastasia Zadeik, and I probably just butchered that, but she's going to introduce herself as well. Anastasia and I have been in the room many times together, and yet this is the first time we've had a really deep personal conversation. And I love the fact that it is going to go all over for you. We are talking about Anastasia's journey. We're talking about books. We're talking about writing. We're talking about funerals. There is no topic that is off limits, and we had a blast doing this. So I am very excited to share our conversation with you. Hi, Anastasia.
Hi.
I am so excited to get to talk to you. We've just discovered that we've been in the same room too many times to not have had this conversation. So now we're just going to
Absolutely.
get to know each other on a next level and let everyone eavesdrop in.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really
Oh, it's my
delighted to be here.
pleasure. I have had so much fun stalking you and getting to know you before even talking to you. Can you introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Sure. So I'm Anastasia Zadeik. That's actually my maiden name. So it's kind of like a pen name because most people know me by my married name, which is Hipkins, and my nickname growing up was Stacy. And so my family and a lot of people that have known me for a long time call me Stacy. So I'm Stacy Hipkins in my non literary world. Everyone in my reading world and writing world knows me as Anastasia Zadeik. So it's like I'm almost like a split personality, but it
That's
also
kind of what it
therefore
just
serves,
sounded like.
I know, but it also serves as a great pseudonym because it's not really like it's really my name. It's not my pen name. So I started writing about 10 years ago, started writing something. Like before that, I was one of those writers who's always, from the time I got my first little puffy pink diary with the key, I've been writing my whole life, but I never really was writing something. And so when my kids went off and they were launched, I decided that I needed to do something to keep my brain active. My mom died of early onset Alzheimer's. So I've been dreading turning 60. And when it finally hit, I was like actually relieved because I still can put a thought together. But I did start writing to kind of keep my mind active. And I became involved in a group called So Say We All, which is actually where I sort of got started with writing something because it's a organization that their tagline is helping people tell their stories and tell them better. And it's you submit stories at the beginning of the month. If they choose your story, they assign you a writing coach and a performance coach, because 2 weeks later you read your story with some images behind you that you've selected to go with it, and you read it in a bar filled with, at the first few times I did it, 200 strangers. Now, of course, I've met many of the people that show up regularly, so it's become a mixture of friends and strangers. But I started doing that. It kind of gave me the confidence that I could write. And after that, I wrote 2 novels, and they're both out. One was called Blurred Fates. It came out in 2022. And my latest one is The Other Side of Nothing, which came out in the end of May this year, 2024.
You were
So,
unlike normal, I'm going to put in quotes, normal writers who, so many authors, you hear they're, oh, I'm an introvert and I don't want to go stand up on a stage. And you're like, yeah. So in addition to my 2 novels, I go stand up and read my stuff to 200 people in a bar that I don't know for
wow.
fun.
So I should have prefaced that with, so I consider myself an introvert, but no one believes me. But I did, my very first time standing up in front of a group was reading, I wrote and delivered my father's eulogy. And it was I never thought that I could do that. I did it for work. My first career was in neuropsych research, and I often had to stand up in front of a large group and give a presentation on something, but it was like cut and dried stuff, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
But I never thought that I could stand up and tell a personal story until I was telling the story of my dad. And I realized that I was basically telling his life story. And so it gave me confidence that I could do that in a setting like that. And my dad was a minister. So I grew up And my grandfather was a huge storyteller. So it kind of runs in the family. And I realized that that's what my dad did every week. He told stories. As a minister, he was telling a story and then trying to relate it to people's life. And all of the people who listen to one of my stories or watch one of my videos, they always say that it's like a little bit like a sermon or a devotion, which I grew up reading devotions at the table with my siblings. There's always a little lesson in my stories, which is kind of funny. And as soon as it's pointed out to me, I see it. Like all of them have some kind of little thing of wisdom at the end that you're supposed to take away.
The one of experience, your mom taught you that experience never hurts after being a lingerie hostess at a restaurant. You all have to go watch that video because now it sounds like Stacy has done something very weird at the age of 17, but she had to go to college, so she had to fund her way.
Experience is the best teacher. Absolutely. And she also told me that if a mistake's not a mistake if you learned from it. If you learned from it, it's a lesson. Then it's not a mistake. So
Ah,
I always try to, and my dad added onto that the worst mistakes are the ones that you try to hide because you usually make another mistake. And so you just compound mistakes. And I told my kids that growing up, like, if you're going to make mistakes, we're human, we're going to make mistakes. The best thing to do is just fess up and tell somebody about it so that you can work through it and make it a lesson. The worst thing you can do is compound it by making additional mistakes to hide the first one. And
mm,
it's still something I live by because I think so many of us get in
wise.
trouble with it's the second mistake and the third mistake that really
Yeah.
get you messed up.
Yeah.
So
So we've alluded to one of your videos of your storytelling, and the other one that you find the fun in funerals, which I adore, because before we started recording, we were talking about how we love funerals and obituaries and the really good ones, not the dry ones, not the, he died and that was it, and he was born and had kids and got married, boom, done. But the really, really good ones. And I love your story about your dad and Bob Chins. And at first I went, Bob Chins, why do I know Bob Chins? I lived in Chicago for 2 years.
you did.
And I did. And I covered the Midwest territory. I had 12 states and would go visit all of my clients and stuff. And I remember that there was a pilot who's like, we got to go to Bob Chin's. We have to go to Bob Chin's. So I drove to Bob Chin's. Somebody else
You've
got
been
us a reservation.
there.
I've been to Bob Chin's. Yes. So I loved your story even more that you're at Bob Chin's and y'all are getting some Mai Tais and some drinks and you're planning a funeral that sounds like a bachelorette party. I loved it. I was like, yeah, I want to play with your family. I think you guys sound like a lot of fun.
That is definitely my favorite story because it's kind of a mixture of, it's bittersweet. There's some sadness in it, but there's also a lot of joy. And I think that's what's interesting about obituaries, honestly, is that it's sad because the person has passed away. But it's truly like a really well written obituary and a well put on funeral is a celebration of a life. And
Yes.
that's what I find. And, I stalked you as well and listened to some of the podcasts, and I listened to the one that you did just a little bit ago. It was just you talking about what you've learned, the lessons you've learned through this podcast experience that you've had. Listen, you're talking to all these people and the gratitude that you feel towards the listeners and the people who've been on your podcast. And I think that that's what I get when I like read a really well written obituary is you get the sense that somebody who had lived a life, left a legacy, was built community, was grateful. Like there's all you can tell all of that in an obituary. And it sort of like reminds you that you have one life. When I read an obituary, I'm reminded, I think about what I want in mine and what do I want people to know about me and what's important to me. And that helps me to live my life. So it's sort of like they're little reminders of what a life can be.
I love that because we recently did our last will and testament and estate plan and all that. And I was like, wow, this really sucks. We're thinking about this, and the thought of death does not, I no, thank you. Like, that doesn't sound good at all. I'm like, I was born and raised Catholic. I'm like, I know that there's heaven, but what is that like? And then you go to these funerals. I'm like, oh, I love hearing all these stories of people. And what do I want them to say about me? And I'm like, do not play. I leaned over at my husband last week. I go, don't play on eagle's wings. Do not play that. And he goes, but you won't be here. I said, I don't care. It will not be playing at my funeral. It played at my
I
father's.
know.
It plays at every funeral. I don't want the song played. He goes, but what are you going to do if it is? I'm like, no, you don't play it. And I'm going to write this down in my will. Do not play it. And in fact, maybe nobody wears black. Maybe I want you all coming in color. And that's just going to be what I want. And you all have to do what I say.
I know.
Why
And
not?
we won't be there. We won't be there.
No.
But there is a, like, I do want whatever ends up happening to me. I want it to be a celebration of life. And my grandmother did that when she died. She wanted us all to wear colorful things. And she gave my mom and dad, we grew up, you know, let's just put it this way. I was the third girl. I didn't have my own coat that had only belonged to me until I was 13. And that was a Christmas present. So it wasn't, we always had what we needed, but we didn't always have what we wanted. And my grandmother wanted us all to wear new dresses. So she gave my parents money to take us shopping, and she wanted us to bring them in and put them on in her hospital room so she could see us before she died. And it was
Oh,
so sweet. I mean, we all went and picked out a new dress, and they were colorful, and we came in and we showed our grandma, and she was so touched because she knew that she wasn't going to be there to see it. But I
mm-hmm.
do want people to wear bright colors, and I do want, the one song I do want played is "It's a Wonderful World," a wonderful world,
Oh, yeah.
because it's a wonderful world, and when we're gone, it's still going to be wonderful. It's just going to
Yeah.
be wonderful without us.
I love there was a story about a woman who hired like a flash mob for her funeral.
Oh my
Did
God,
you
that would
read
be
that?
amazing.
This was a
No,
while ago, a few years back. She hired a flash mob to come and perform in the middle of the funeral. Like, why not? Why wouldn't you
I love that. I love that. I don't
just
want it to be
shock them?
somber. And I mean, people, I want people to be able to laugh at my funeral. If I
And we
have
say we won't be there,
one
but
moment,
we'll be there. We will hear what is
I
said.
think we will. I think we will. I don't know. I'm not sure what's going to come next, but I definitely, yeah, I
I
kind of,
was pondering that last week, and I told my husband, I go, I wonder, like, do you get to this place and there's only the people that you really liked? So you don't have to deal with any drama with people you didn't like. You get to eat the food that you want, but you're never really hungry, and you don't have to cook either. Like, are these the things that happen in heaven? I hope.
and
Like, nope.
you don't worry about what you look like
No.
because you don't have to.
Yeah.
So you can eat whatever you want because there's no worry about that. And I don't know, like it feels like it should be all of the above, all of the things you just said. But on the other hand, if I'm an insomniac, horrible insomniac, have been my whole life. So if it is just a really long sleep, I'm good with that too.
I can, okay. Yeah. But I feel like
Because
I might get bored.
I might get bored, but I'm not sure. Do you think we'll be conscious? I don't know. These are
I
big
don't know.
questions.
I know
Big
it's
questions.
and I think this is why I'm like, well, what just happens? Like, you just disappear. Like, it's weird. Like, what
It is weird.
happens in that moment? It's
It is
yeah,
weird.
and then life just goes on here.
It does. And what's interesting is that a lot of times I think about this kind of thing when I'm traveling and I'm in a different place. And I know that the people in my world are still going about their lives
Mhm.
doing all the things they do here on my street. And I'm somewhere else. It's sort of like that's what I think it'll be like, kind of like they'll like that everything will still be going on, but I'll be someplace else.
Yeah. And then you get those messages of being needed. Like, I was traveling the other day, and although everything was running smoothly at home, it was, "Where's the rice?
Yeah.
Where's this? What do we do about this? And I went, oh my gosh, my time is not coming anytime soon.
The other day I was talking to my husband and I said, I was cleaning out the filter of the washing machine. And, it says on it you're supposed to do it every month, which I don't do,
Yeah,
but I do it every once in a while
because it's gross. Yeah,
because
it's
it's
nasty.
gross.
Yeah.
And you realize, like, after you do it, that the laundry smells fresher and all that. But so I came downstairs and I said, I was just doing this and I realized that you don't know how to do this. So if I die, I need to show you how to clean a filter in a washing machine. And he was laughing. He was like, that's probably not going to be the highest priority, but okay.
And see, you know what mine does? He goes, hey, you haven't cleaned out that thing on the washing machine in a while, have you? That thing that you did that it was gross and there's like water that comes out, but maybe we need to do that soon. And I'm like, yeah, we, because
We, the
you don't
royal we.
even know what this is on the washing machine. You didn't even know that that existed. And you've been living longer than I have, but you didn't even know it existed and you still don't
I
know how
know.
to do it.
The
We
thing.
will get to that. Yes. But you're right. There's so much that you're like, what are y'all going to do?
What are you going to do? They'll muddle through.
I'm not going to worry about it. I'll be up there eating my sushi and drinking
And,
wine
yep,
and not worried
exactly.
about a thing.
I think that's the biggest thing for me is also as somebody that I've realized now that I suffered from anxiety and depression my whole life. And I just only recently started. I mean, I've been addressing it on and off throughout my life with various, I exercise like crazy and I have seen counselors, but I didn't start taking medication for it until just recently. And wow, it changed my life totally. And I'm not saying that medication is for everybody because I'm not saying that, but for me, it was huge. I feel like that's also like a representative of what, if there's a heaven, that will be what it's like. Like
Mm,
all of the things that we've struggled with in life will suddenly be changed and we'll be in this place where those things don't happen. And that would be so cool,
that would be
right? Like
nice. Yeah.
all the things we worry about and all
Hmm.
of the anxieties that we have about the world could go away. That seems pretty terrific.
What point was it, since you've brought this up, if you want to talk more about it, at what point did you realize that you have anxiety, that there is depression, that these are the labels that go with it?
So for me, I mean, I had, there were signs all along the way that I had anxiety and that I mean, I knew I struggled with some mild depression and then it became more serious at times. I could keep it at bay with exercise most of the time. I exercised to the point of like, like I don't want to say pain, but for sure exhaustion. Like I pushed myself really hard. And then when I would do that, I would feel better. And I did it every day. So I became an exercise kind of, not an addict, but I needed it for my mental health. And then there came a time when that just wasn't enough anymore. And I had a moment that I talked about with Matt on his
Matt, yeah.
podcast. His podcast is called Life Shift. If anybody wants to check
He's
that
been on
out
the
as
show
well,
too. So,
yeah,
yes.
it's a great podcast. He talks about this moment. He talks about these moments in people's lives, and for me, it happened in February of 2021, right after the pandemic, and I kind of I'd been holding in a lot of what I now know is severe anxiety and depression, and I got to the point where I decided that I didn't want to be here anymore and that the people in my life would be better off without me. And I thankfully had a glimmer of, as I was executing my plan, I had a glimmer of my kids and what it would be like for them, and realized that I would be doing something that would be really, really devastating to them. And that was enough to keep me going and to stop what I was
Hmm.
doing. And at that point, a friend found me and basically told me, like, I'm here and we're going to get you help. And that I made the call that was one of the hardest calls I've ever made in my life, which was to say, I didn't want to be here and I was prepared to end my life and I need help. And I was so tempted to do what I always have done for many, many years, decades, which is to say, no, I'm okay. Actually, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. And I did that for a long time, and I would make myself fine. And when I finally said I'm not okay, and I went to see a doctor and was put on some prescription medication, which it wasn't like a magic pill. The first one didn't work. The second, so I don't want to make people or make it seem like this was everything was fine. It took months for me to find the things that worked for me. Unfortunately, the first medication that worked for me, I had a really rare side effect, and I actually almost died from a medical, like a physical side effect of the medication. Didn't know that it was from the medication, and when they finally figured it out, I was able to switch medications. And so it's been a difficult process, but coming out on the other side of it has been so amazing that I feel like it was a gift that I actually got to that point of needing to say I need help,
Mm.
because struggling along on this sort of like I thought I had to rely on myself to fix myself, and realizing that I didn't have to do that, and that there were other people that could help me, and that it was a good thing to reach out for help, was such a life-changing moment for me. And now I feel like every day is a gift, and I really truly believe some of the things that I wrote in my second book. They I think the writing of the book almost contributed in some ways, because it was a really deep book and it was about mental illness, and so it forced me to think about things that maybe I wasn't really prepared to think about in my own life, and to do it through a character enabled me to kind of get there and do it for myself. And one of the characters in the book talks about this philosophy of life based on Albert Camus' book, The Myth of Sisyphus, which is to live life as a succession of presents. And for me, that is my new motto. And I use presence in both senses of the word: present like a gift, and also
Hmm.
present like the moment that you're in, this present moment. And life is a succession of present moments. And if you can look around you and like how lucky I am to be sitting here right now talking to you. This is a moment, and I can appreciate this moment, and then the next moment, and the one after that. And that has changed my whole world. When I'm taking a walk, I notice the flowers, I notice the clouds, I stop and notice the moments. And that's really what life is about, is moment after moment. So for me,
I love that. No, I love that. And that it reminds me of, I don't know if you can see, I have a client's book still, The Art of Noticing, in which she took a photograph every single day of something in nature, something different, and just noticed, like, this is what's in my backyard. And after going through all of these photos, I started to stop, pause
yeah,
as I'm doing the dishes, notice that, the leaves are changing colors every so many days, and to just notice and to pause.
yeah,
And it's funny, I feel like it's such a shame that it takes us this long in our lifetimes to really figure these things out. And I think we all love hitting 40, because that's when we actually start paying attention, and
yeah.
we grow comfortable with who we are,
It
and it
took
just
me
gets
till
better.
60. But at 60, I sort of, and I've read about this, and a lot of other women in particular have said this, that for me, 60 was like a turning a page. First of all, because I could stop worrying about being diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at age 60,
Mhm.
but also that I realized, and maybe the anti-anxiety medication and the therapy and the CBT, everything that they suggested to me, I tried. And they all work together to kind of make me realize that I'm all I've got. Like, and there's, those sayings like, be yourself because there's no one else that can fill that job. Like, I really feel like that's true now. And that I'm learning to stop and notice not just the world around me, but stop and notice how I feel in it, and what I can contribute to it in that moment. And it's just a much healthier view. One of
Yeah.
my favorite things is I have this, for a long time, I was doing it on Instagram. I called it Stop, Look Closer. So like I would make myself stop on a walk and look down and then look closer at it and closer until I noticed something that I hadn't noticed before. And there's so many, like I never realized that there's in bougainvillea, there's these little tiny white flowers in the pink flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And inside the little white flowers are little tiny, like the closer you look, the more you see the beauty that's in nature, in our world. And the same is true for people. The more you stop and notice people, the more you talk to them, the more you see the beauty in each person. So it's just, it works for almost everything. So
I love that because I feel like we need it so much right now.
don't we? Don't we? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
yet there's a lot of truth to that too, because I feel like especially we're recording this before the election and we see so much ugliness. And at the same time, I also feel like I've seen so much camaraderie also come out of it. For those of us who I know I reached out to you last week thanking you for your Substack and I read it and was like, yes. So there's these not just beliefs, but life stories and lessons behind each of us that we don't know.
yeah.
And this has brought that out in us as well, which I'm grateful for the ones that I'm like, oh, yes, like I can, commiserate or agree with you or, connect with you on that level. And I think that's part of it.
It's true. There, for all of the complaints, and I have complaints about social media, don't get me wrong, but there has been like this ability to tell people stories. Like Substack, I think, is a way for people to tell their stories, like small little bits of their life, and share it with other people. And same with podcasts, like the ability to 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 really stop and listen and talk to somebody new and find out that you have so much in common. It's crazy. I and then when you listen to them, you can tell when people are really connecting. It's a
Yes.
really good, so there's been some good things about social media and the ability to connect with people across. I don't even, where are you right
I'm in
now?
San Jose, so I'm not far from you.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. I'm not too far, but
Yeah, but I mean,
yeah, there's been people all over the world even. I mean, the other day I talked to Emma Gray and she's in Australia.
she's,
So
oh,
I love her. I adore Emma.
she
And
is
it's
so
funny.
sweet.
Matt edited that episode and he goes, you can tell you guys like each other. Yes,
She blurbed my book. She
that's
is
right.
such
Yeah.
a lovely person. I mean, and her first book, I haven't read her second
Oh,
book yet, but her first
the
book,
second one, so good.
oh, really,
So good. Yes.
all right, it's
Yeah.
on my TBR,
Yes.
which keeps getting taller and taller.
Same
So many
friend.
good books out there right now. I know, which is a good thing for readers, but I got to tell you, for authors, it's a little bit of it's daunting because there's so many books coming out all the time and so
Yeah.
many good ones. It's
And
hard
I
to
don't
take
think I
turns.
realized how many come out so frequently until you really start paying attention and you're getting
Yeah,
emails from publishers. You're like, oh my gosh,
I know.
there's,
I know. And I did the math, and depending on which source you use as the number of books that come out every year, like I think traditionally published, they say it's like a million a year traditionally published, but when you include all of the other types like small publishers, self-published books, hybrid published books, it's closer to, the estimates are between 2 and 4 million a year. Like, so I mean, and that's a huge disparity between 2 and 4. But even if you use two or one, it's like thousands of book on average every week
yeah,
coming out, and that it's just mind boggling,
which is
really.
why I need to give myself grace when I go, oh, I haven't heard of that one. Well, yeah, I wonder why.
Exactly. No, I mean, and obviously, like depends on your genre and what you like to read, but still, that's a lot of books.
Yeah.
So
What do you like to read?
I read pretty much everything. If you looked, so my current pile was love. I read a lot of fiction, but I also love memoirs. I do like nonfiction. I like books of essays. I like short stories. I'm reading two really great books right now. One is called I got to grab it. Hold on a second. It's called Third Ear. It's called Third Ear. It's by Elizabeth Rosner, and it's reflections on the art and science of listening. And it's part memoir, part like science, like about how we listen and how the brain, and like it's fascinating. But I'm also reading Finding Margaret Fuller right now by Alison Pataki, and then I'm reading On Being Jewish Now, which is
Oh,
the
yes.
book from Zibby. So those are the three, and I'm listening to the Jessica Knoll Bright Young Women.
I'm glad that I feel in the same boat. I'm listening right now to Gretchen Rubin's Five Senses.
Ooh,
So I feel like that is connected to the third listening,
the
and
art of yeah, the
because
30 inner,
yes,
yeah.
because yes, she goes through the different senses and like the science behind it, and then
Ooh,
she goes and she focuses on a sense and does something to intentionally, like color. She picks a color and then she looks for everything with that color, and she listens to something.
cool.
So it's interesting, yeah. And then I'm reading Leslie Rasmussen's The Stories We Cannot Tell.
Oh, yes.
That's a good one. That one I got up at 5:30 this morning to continue reading. And then I just finished Laura Dave's the last night we saw him. All of her books are like
The last
the
time,
last time we saw him.
yeah,
I think that's it.
yeah.
Yeah.
The one
Yeah, which I love.
they made that into a Netflix series,
Yes,
didn't
it's not
they?
out yet.
Yes,
Yes. So I
yes.
was excited. I'm like, "Oh, I got to read this." And I loved that one. Oh my goodness. Couldn't
Okay.
put it down. Yeah.
There's
There's a lot.
and there's so many good books. There seriously are so many books coming out, and but I think there's also right now there, part of being I think part of book marketing is finding the audience for your book, right? Like because not everybody likes everything, and
Mhm.
but I think that for some people they're looking for something that, and they don't even necessarily know what they're looking for, and the book hits them at the right time. And
Yeah.
something that someone wise once told me, my writing coach told me, while you're writing your book, it's your book. But as soon as you put it out into the world, it's your readers' books. And they're going to bring to it everything that makes them them. So they're going to bring their history, their relationships, they're going to bring where they are right now in their life. And they're going to bring all of that to it. And each person is going to read this book differently. And they're going to relate to different parts of it. And some of them are going to might be triggered by something in it, not necessarily in a bad way. Sometimes you can be triggered in a good way. Like you see yourself in a character and you realize that you could learn something from what they're going through in the book. Even though it's fictional, it can give you empathy
Mhm.
for yourself, it can give you empathy for others. So I think it's just about finding the right audience and finding the right book.
That's such a great point because it reminds me of reviews. I don't read reviews of a book before I read the book. I will go read them after just to see what other people have said, but I
Yeah.
feel like that it's such a good point why authors shouldn't pay so much attention to what some of these written reviews are because exactly of that. There was one I just interviewed the author the other day and I loved the book and I
Yeah.
told her this is what I got out of it and she was like, "Yes, this is what I wanted." And then I went back and I read the reviews and there was one where it was a horrible review. And I
Yeah.
went, "Well, why?" And as you say that, like what was going on in that person's life that they pulled that out of this book? Yeah.
Absolutely. I was at a book club for my first book, and we were talking about the book for probably 30 or 40 minutes. And then I realized that one of the women wasn't saying anything. And I kind of turned to her and I said, I said, not to put you on the spot, is there anything you want to say though? Because, I don't want to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk. And she said, you guys are discussing a different book than the book I read. And she's like, I read this book. And she held up the book, and it was my first book, this one, Blurred Fates. And she said, I grew up with a mom who was, and then she described her mom, and she said, and as soon as I started reading the book, I realized what was happening because I grew up with someone like this, and I read it in a totally different way than the way you guys are describing it. And it
Wow.
was fascinating for me as a writer, as the writer, to both in two ways. One, she said, that's a compliment because you portrayed this character so believably that I related to what it would be like to be around that person. And it was just fascinating. But she saw the book like in a totally different way because of her life experience,
Yeah.
basically. And it was one of my first book clubs, and I like really brought home that idea of it's not the same book for any two readers.
And it's, you know what? I've never talked about that with someone before, really on the show or outside of how true that is. So I love this. This is a new topic.
Well, and I mean, if you think about it, like, so, I mean, there will be books, I'll go to a book club, and I've been in book clubs for the last 35 years of my life. And, you'll hear books that I thought were fabulous that people didn't like. And I'll be like, how can you not like this book? And then they'll explain it to me and I'll be like, oh yeah, I guess I didn't see that. Or somebody will bring up this always, because as a reader, there have been times when I've seen like something that I think is like truly symbolic, like something that like a thread that's throughout the book. Like, have you noticed how there's always like in this book, I deliberately put in a thread about light, but I always assume that authors are doing that. So I'll be like looking for those things. And
Hmm.
then I was at a book club for my second book, and somebody brought up this theme that they kept seeing, and I had not intentionally put that in there. So it's funny because I think that, you're sort of, like I said, we bring all of our history and our reading experiences to a book, and so we might be looking for something that the author didn't even intend, or but it's there,
Yeah.
and maybe it's unintentional. I don't know. It's unconscious. It's such a fascinating thing. Books are so fascinating to me.
Yeah, I love them. I love that there are people who are writing them from their own experience, that there's parts of us in the book, that there's parts of what's around us that are in these books. And then the way the reader reads them, that takes on a life of its own because
So
of how, their life. So yeah, it's absolutely amazing and fascinating and how we can interpret it in so many different ways.
exactly, and then also how when you're in a book group and someone brings up something that they saw, that it can change your perspective then.
Mm,
So like even the perspective that you had the whole time you were reading it. I remember reading Bel Canto by Ann Patchett years ago. I was in a book club, and somebody said to me, and I remember this to this day, it was not to me, to the group, it's like the book itself is an opera, and one of the main characters is an opera singer in Bel Canto, and obviously Bel Canto is an opera production. But I had not thought of that. And as soon as she said it, I started seeing that in the
mm.
plot and in the characters, and it was like another level of appreciation. So I think that opportunities like this, podcasts talking about book clubs talking about books, even like Facebook groups talking about books, you can learn from other readers something that you didn't see, and it can expand the universe of that book in a different way. Does that make
Oh, I love
sense?
that. Yeah, I love that. We're going to quote that somehow.
So one of the other books that I'm just now reading or just finished reading is called Lost in Thought by Deborah Sarah. And the whole book is about a woman whose her boyfriend is a neuroscientist, and he's trying to talk to her about the research he's doing about the fact that so much of what we think is free will and our ability to put conscious thought into words is actually unconscious, because so many times when we open our mouth to speak, and this I think about this a lot now that I've read the book, on a podcast or in a conversation at a dinner party or even just out and about, that you haven't really thought through what you're going to say.
Hmm.
You open your mouth to speak and words start coming out and they make sense, but you didn't think the whole sentence through before you said it. And it's interesting because on your one of your things I read or listened to that you were talking about, you said that you used to, and I should let you tell it, that you used to
Script.
have
I used to
notes. Yeah.
script everything.
Can
Yep.
you talk about that?
Yeah, in the beginning, I scripted all of my episodes. I would spend, and it took forever to type everything out. And then I would read it, but it sounded conversational. Like this was, I just read it because I typed in my own words. And it got to the point, and I think this is where a lot of podcasters just stop because it's so exhausting, the time. And I
Mm.
went, oh my gosh, I'm taking so much time to do this. And I can't sustain it, that I'm typing this out and then I'm saying it, uh, and so I stopped and just I now do some bullet points if it's a solo. If it's an interview, there's nothing. I do my research in advance where like I stalked you for the last 2 days. I have looked at your website. I have watched your videos. I've listened to podcasts. I've perused your books. I've done all of these things to prep it, but I've just shown up. And I think it's much more, I don't want to say realistic, and I hate the word authentic, but it's authentic in that
Yeah.
way. It is, whatever is my thought comes right out of my mouth. I don't think about it. I don't script it.
Isn't that interesting? But like when you really think about that, like how do we do that? How does that all happen? Like it's just fascinating to me. Like I open my mouth, I'm talking to you, I have a general idea of what we're talking about, but the words are just coming out. It's fascinating. Where does that
And it
happen?
probably is why we mess up so often. Like we put our foot in our mouth,
I know.
right? You're like, oh,
I know.
I shouldn't have said that.
I
Oops.
shouldn't have
Yeah.
said that. And that's why I think people use filler words too, right? Because our brain hasn't caught up with our mouth hasn't caught up with our thoughts or whatever. But yeah, so the ums come in and the likes and
Right. This is fascinating. And it brings in your past career, it feels like.
the neuroscience. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I think the brain is the last frontier. It's so fascinating to me on so many levels, but particularly now with where everything is going with the fact that we are talking more openly about how our mental health impacts our lives and how their whole idea of neurodivergence and this idea that we want everyone to be thinking the same way, but we don't. None of us think the same way. Every one of us comes into the world with a different brain, and that's what makes us unique. And so this idea that sometimes maybe we're trying to overcorrect people to make them our version of normal when maybe their version is different, and we need to appreciate that and not look at it as something that's deficient in any way,
Mm-hmm.
but to embrace it and celebrate those differences. We are not there yet, and I don't know exactly how we get there. But for sure, there's like, and that's one of the issues actually that I address in The Other Side of Nothing is one of the characters has been diagnosed with a mental illness, and he doesn't want to take medication or do anything to change it because he believes that is also what makes him who he is. It gives him his creativity. It gives him his view of life, his energy, his way of experiencing his senses. And when he takes the medication, it dulls all of those things. And it's actually a real issue for a lot of people with bipolar disorder, that taking the medications that will level their moods does remove some of those highs that they feel and some of that creative energy that they feel during that time. And many people have been posthumously like diagnosed with bipolar disorder that were creatives and that experienced periods of incredible creativity and energy and productivity, and then also experienced profound depression, and often were at the time placed into facilities to deal with that. And it's such an interesting topic to me. Like, where does creativity stop? Where does genius stop and insanity begin? Like that whole idea.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, I know I'm using a term that is outdated, but it's just the brain. The brain is fascinating.
Yeah. Humans.
Is it because our neurotransmitters are just spinning way too fast that we have? But is that a gift for some people? And if you can control it, I don't know. It's such an interesting and fascinating topic that
There's so much. I feel like we could probably keep going all day long.
I know. I'm sorry.
No.
I just went off.
I love it. That's what these conversations are for. So we can go wherever the path may lead. And obviously we could go have lunch and cocktails and keep going.
I know. And next time we see each other in person, we're going to be like, let's do this.
Oh yeah. And we're going to, yeah,
For sure.
forget everything else. We'll be like, no, we have some catching up to do. Where can everybody find you and buy your books, Anastasia/Stacy?
So you can find me at my website is anastasiazadeik.com, and that's a doozy, I know, but
It'll be in the show notes. It's
yeah.
okay.
And I'm pretty much on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Well, I'm not on Twitter anymore, and Threads and LinkedIn. I think almost everything is under Anastasia Zadeik. So just my name. So if you look for that, and my dog he's trapped in my office and he doesn't like it in there, but he has to be in there because he's the perfect watchdog. He lets me know when there's someone on the other side of the street walking, just in case. I wanted to make sure. Yeah, and then you can find my books anywhere books are sold. My first book is Blurred Fates, and my second book is The Other Side of Nothing. This one is the one that's closest to my heart. I did not get a chance to talk about why I wrote it, but it's in the book. So if you get through to the author's note, you'll find out why I wrote it. And it's definitely not that I have a favorite book, because you're not supposed to, but this one definitely comes from the heart.
I love it. And you know what? I love reading the acknowledgments and author's notes, because to me, it's almost like an obituary. Like you get to really see the truth behind. I'm always like, oh, let's see, who do we think and what kind of research went into this? Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's funny. This is one of the questions whenever I interview another author, I always ask them about the acknowledgement, because you find out so much
So
about the
much.
people that were important to them, or the person that inspired them to write, or it's just mine.
Yeah.
This one, my dedication is for Olivia and Jack, my answer. And you'll have to read the book to know what the question is.
I love it. All right, everybody, go read the book, buy the book, and then send us your answers.
Yeah, oh my God, that's such a great idea. I should have people send me their answers.
Yes. All right, make that your
Michelle,
next
you are
Instagram
a
post.
genius. You are a genius.
Every once in a while, I don't know what's going to come out.
That was perfect. That's perfect.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad we got this chance to get together and chat and let the world eavesdrop on it.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Friends, this is what I absolutely love about this podcast and all of my conversations. It's that you don't know where it's going to go, and you really get to see a behind the scenes conversation between two people who just want to get to know each other. And I love the fact that I got to know Anastasia so much and on such a deep personal level. I adore her. We are definitely now friends. There was even some phone number exchanges at the end. So you know that I feel that's next level. And I'm very excited about that, and to really see where our friendship and collaborations continue to go. Remember that you have a story. You have a story to share that people want to hear, because your life is important. What you have done is important, and we want to hear it. So I'm so grateful that Anastasia joined me, and I'm grateful that you all got to listen to her incredible story and to have fun with us. And let's see what happens next.